The galaxy stood unified under the iron fist of the Galactic Empire, an unparalleled force that spanned from the core worlds to the outer rim. With fleets of star destroyers numbering in the tens of thousands and legions of stormtroopers enforcing the will of the Emperor, no rebellion or foreign power had ever posed a credible threat to its dominion. The Imperial Navy's flagship, the Executor-class Star Dreadnought, represented the zenith of technological and militaristic prowess. At its heart, the Empire was a machine of conquest and control, with Coruscant as its glittering crown jewel. Now imagine the arrival of the Yuuzhan Vong, an extragalactic species steeped in religious zealotry, wielding organic technology unlike anything seen in the known galaxy. They brought with them an insatiable desire to reshape worlds in their own image, scorning machines as heretical. When they invaded the galaxy during the era of the New Republic, they tore through its defenses, overwhelming the disorganized remnants of the Rebel Alliance. But had they appeared at the height of the Galactic Empire, their fate would have been vastly different. The Yuuzhan Vong relied on terror and destruction to weaken their foes. Their coral-like worldships were monstrous constructs, capable of overwhelming most planetary defenses. Yet, in the face of the Imperial Starfleet, even these formidable weapons would pale. The Empire's doctrine of overwhelming force and precision would transform the Vong invasion into a catastrophic misstep. The Emperor's intelligence network, the most expansive in galactic history, would detect the Yuuzhan Vong well before they became a credible threat. The Empire's spy masters, analysts, and droid networks, augmented by the terrifying reach of the Inquisitorius, would ensure that no move by the invaders went unnoticed. The first wave of Vong incursions would be met not by scattered planetary militias, but by an armada of star destroyers, led by some of the galaxy's most ruthless commanders. Consider Grand Admiral Thrawn, whose tactical genius turned even the most desperate battles into decisive victories. Though Thrawn was often an enigma to his peers, the Emperor understood his value. Given time to analyze the Yuuzhan Vong's biological ships and weaponry, Thrawn would quickly discern their weaknesses. His methodical dissection of their strategies would reduce the Vong's advantage to nothing more than curiosities in a tactical playbook. Meanwhile, the Empire's technological superiority would be undeniable. The Yuuzhan Vong's Dovan basals, capable of generating gravity wells to disrupt enemy formations or absorb laser fire, might initially surprise Imperial commanders. However, the Empire's engineers, under pressure from their Sith overlords, would rapidly adapt. The Empire's TIE defenders, equipped with shield generators and advanced targeting systems, could outmaneuver the slower Vong coral skippers, which lacked similar technological refinement. Each engagement would teach the Empire more about their enemy, and soon, the Vong's organic advantage would become a tactical liability. The true scale of the Empire's power, however, lay not only in its fleets but in its unwavering will to dominate. The Death Star, an instrument of pure terror, could obliterate entire planets with a single shot. Should the Vong establish a foothold on a vital world, it would take only a single order from the Emperor to reduce it to ash. The sheer psychological impact of such a weapon could shatter the morale of even the most fervent Vong warriors. Even their fanatical embrace of death would falter when faced with the annihilation of their homeworlds. Furthermore, the Emperor himself was a master of the dark side of the Force, capable of manipulating events on a galactic scale. While the Yuuzhan Vong were strangely void in the Force, rendering them immune to traditional Force-based assaults, this would not hinder Palpatine's overall strategy. Through visions and premonitions, he would guide his forces with unerring precision, predicting the enemy's movements before they even realized their intentions. This preternatural foresight would allow the Empire to anticipate and counter every major offensive the Vong attempted. Additionally, the Empire's vast industrial complex, encompassing countless worlds, could outproduce the Yuuzhan Vong in every conceivable way. For every Star Destroyer lost, the Empire could commission 10 more. The assembly lines of Quat drive yards, Fondor, and other key shipyards would work ceaselessly, churning out fleets to replace any losses. In contrast, the Yuuzhan Vong, reliant on the slow growth of their organic ships, would find themselves outpaced and outgunned. On the ground, the might of the Imperial army would present an insurmountable challenge. The Yuuzhan Vong were formidable warriors, but the Empire's overwhelming numbers and disciplined ranks of stormtroopers would grind them down. Walker divisions, including the iconic ATC Ace, would prove devastating against Vong ground forces. The Yuuzhan Vong's reliance on biots and living armor would falter against the precision and firepower of Imperial weaponry. Moreover, the Empire's ruthlessness would play a pivotal role in its inevitable victory. Unlike the New Republic, which often hesitated due to ethical considerations, the Empire would act with cold efficiency. Entire populations could be conscripted, entire worlds could be strip-mined for resources, and any form of dissent would be crushed without hesitation. The Emperor would not hesitate to use biological or chemical warfare, should it prove effective against the Vong. Perhaps the most defining element of the conflict would be the Emperor's Sith philosophy. The Yuuzhan Vong's gods would hold no sway over a galaxy where the dark side permeated every aspect of governance and military doctrine. The Sith belief in the survival of the fittest and the imposition of order through domination would resonate in every battle, ensuring that the Vong's religious fervor was met with an equally unyielding doctrine of imperial supremacy. The culmination of these factors would result in a systematic extermination of the Yuuzhan Vong presence in the galaxy. Their world ships, once symbols of hope and sanctuary, would be reduced to drifting wrecks, preyed upon by swarms of TIE fighters and Imperial interdictor cruisers. Their warriors, no matter how fanatical, would be obliterated in a relentless tide of blaster fire and orbital bombardments. The Empire's victory would not just be military, it would be total. Every aspect of Yuuzhan Vong culture would be studied, dissected, and ultimately eradicated. Those who survived would be enslaved or subjected to experiments, their once proud civilization reduced to little more than a historical footnote in the archives of Coruscant. With their defeat, the galaxy would once again stand united under the Empire's banner, its dominion unchallenged, its will enforced. The Yuuzhan Vong would learn too late that in a galaxy ruled by the Emperor, there was no place for rivals. The Empire's capacity for annihilation would ensure that the Vong invasion would be remembered not as a war, but as a massacre. The Galactic Empire was not just a government, it was the ultimate expression of power and control. Against such an entity, even the most formidable of enemies were destined to fall. The Yuuzhan Vong's ambition would be their undoing, and the galaxy would witness the unyielding might of an empire that brooked no defiance. The Galactic Empire, at its height, was the epitome of militarized dominance. Its reach extended across the galaxy, and its sheer might was unparalleled. Among the most fearsome symbols of this power was the Eclipse-class super star destroyer, a vessel of unimaginable size and firepower. Over 17 kilometers long, the Eclipse was more than a warship, it was a harbinger of annihilation, capable of single-handedly turning the tide of any conflict. It housed a super laser rivaling the destructive potential of the Death Star, albeit on a smaller scale. This weapon could obliterate entire fleets or render fortified planetary defenses obsolete with a single blast. To the Yuuzhan Vong, even in their most fanatical state, such a vessel would seem like an avatar of death. But the Eclipse was not alone. Dozens of superstar destroyers, each one a titanic leviathan of destruction, formed the core of the Empire's upper echelon fleet. From the legendary Executor to the fearsome Vengeance, these ships operated as command vessels, mobile fortresses, and symbols of the Emperor's unyielding rule. These behemoths were not merely massive in scale, they were protected by near-impenetrable shielding and bristled with hundreds of turbolaser batteries, ion cannons, and fighter bays capable of deploying entire wings of TIE fighters in seconds. These vessels were supported by an armada of over 25,000 Imperial-class star destroyers, the backbone of the Empire's navy. Each star destroyer was a floating city, equipped with the firepower to level planets and a complement of stormtroopers ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The Yuuzhan Vong might have marveled at their own world ships, but compared to the industrialized might of the Empire, they were crude and outmatched. The Vong's fleet tactics, centered around their living ships and gravity-warping Doven basils, would crumble under the weight of coordinated barrages from thousands of star destroyers. What truly sealed the Vong's fate, however, was the Empire's capacity for infinite logistical support. The Empire's ability to field and maintain this vast navy was underpinned by its near-limitless industrial base. For every Star Destroyer lost, 10 more would roll out from the shipyards of Kuat, Fondor, Bilbringi, and countless other worlds. These shipyards operated around the clock, their production capacity rivaling entire sectors of galactic economy. TIE fighters, ground vehicles, and support ships were produced in staggering numbers, ensuring the Empire could replace losses faster than the Vong could comprehend. In stark contrast, the Yuuzhan Vong relied on organic technology that grew slowly and could not be replaced with the same speed. Every coral skipper lost and every warship destroyed would represent a blow that could not easily be recovered. Their Doven basils, though effective against isolated groups of ships, would be overwhelmed by the sheer firepower and numbers of the Imperial fleet. The Empire's strategy of massed assaults, coordinated strikes, and ruthless attrition would grind the Vong to dust. The support vessels of the Empire, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, provided the logistical backbone that ensured every campaign could be sustained indefinitely. These vessels carried fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements, enabling the Imperial war machine to operate across multiple fronts without ever faltering. Even in the vast voids of space, where traditional supply lines would be vulnerable, the Empire's interdictor cruisers and hyperlane control would ensure that the Yuuzhan Vong had no room to maneuver or retreat. Every engagement would tilt further and further in favor of the Empire. The Vong's early victories, driven by surprise and their grotesque bioweapons, would quickly be rendered insignificant. The sheer scale of the Imperial response would overwhelm even the most ambitious of Vong offensives. The Eclipse, leading a battle group of superstar destroyers and thousands of supporting vessels, could devastate entire Vong armadas in hours. Planetary sieges would be broken by precision orbital bombardments, followed by waves of TIE bombers reducing ground targets to rubble. The Empire's doctrine of total war would leave no avenue for the Vong to exploit. Their attempts to infiltrate or destabilize Imperial worlds would be met with the brutal efficiency of the Imperial Security Bureau and the Emperor's Inquisitors. Every insurgency would be crushed, every act of sabotage punished with merciless retribution. The Empire's ability to project power to any corner of the galaxy ensured that the Vong could never establish a secure foothold. The scale of the Empire's dominance was not merely a matter of numbers, but of unrelenting will. The Emperor himself, a master of the dark side, would direct this war with ruthless precision. Palpatine's ability to foresee and manipulate events would allow the Empire to preemptively strike at the Vong's weaknesses. Even as the Vong reveled in their fanaticism, they would find themselves consistently outmaneuvered, their strategies anticipated and countered. In this conflict, there was no scenario in which the Yuuzhan Vong could hope for victory. Against the industrialized juggernaut of the Empire, backed by the strategic genius of its commanders and the dark will of its emperor, the Vong's zealotry and unconventional tactics would amount to nothing. The Empire's ability to deploy fleets of superstar destroyers and tens of thousands of star destroyers, supported by an endless stream of reinforcements, ensured that the Yuuzhan never stood a chance. They had invaded a galaxy that was ruled by the most powerful regime in its history, a regime that could not be cowed or defeated by mere numbers or fanaticism. In the end, the Yuuzhan Vong would be annihilated, their fleets shattered, their warriors slain, and their gods rendered impotent in the face of the Emperor's indomitable will. The Galactic Empire was more than a galactic power, it was a force of nature, and no force, no matter how zealous or alien, could withstand it. At the center of the Galactic Empire's titanic war machine, where the might of tens of thousands of star destroyers and the fearsome Eclipse loomed, would stand Grand Admiral Thrawn. A master of strategy and the Empire's most brilliant tactician, Thrawn would be the linchpin of the Empire's inevitable annihilation of the Yuuzhan Vong. Under his command, the full weight of the Imperial Navy would transform from a blunt instrument of overwhelming force into a scalpel of calculated destruction. Thrawn was no mere naval officer, he was a visionary whose genius turned even the most lopsided conflicts into victories. His capacity to understand and exploit the psychology and culture of his enemies was unmatched. Thrawn's infamous study of art and culture would give him a profound insight into the Yuuzhan Vong. Despite their extragalactic origin, The Vong were deeply religious and ritualistic, and their disdain for technology would quickly become their greatest weakness in Thrawn's eyes. Every piece of their biotechnology, from their coral warships to their amphistaffs, would be scrutinized and dissected. Thrawn would learn to predict their battle formations, their reactions to adversity, and even their ideological breaking points. Yet at the height of the Empire, Thrawn's strategic brilliance would amplify the power of the already indomitable Imperial fleet. He would lead the Eclipse, a ship so massive and powerful that it alone could devastate entire systems. Flanked by dozens of other superstar destroyers and supported by tens of thousands of star destroyers, Thrawn would orchestrate a campaign of systematic annihilation against the Yuuzhan Vong. Every engagement would be a masterstroke, every battle a decisive victory. Under Thrawn's leadership, the Empire would not merely fight the Vong, it would dismantle their invasion with cold, unrelenting precision. Thrawn's hallmark was his ability to use limited resources to achieve overwhelming victories. Now, imagine this genius in command of the largest military force ever assembled. The Empire's vast resources, its endless streams of reinforcements and support vessels, would become tools in Thrawn's hands. He would deploy fleets in meticulously planned maneuvers, outflanking and encircling the Vong in every theater of war. While the Yuuzhan Vong relied on brute force and fanatical zeal, Thrawn's approach would be one of calculated efficiency. He would lure their fleets into traps, exploiting their rigid adherence to doctrine and their overconfidence in their biological technology. Thrawn's tactical adaptability would ensure that no Vong tactic, no matter how unconventional, could turn the tide of the war. The Vong's reliance on Dovan basals to absorb fire and manipulate gravity would at first seem like a formidable advantage. But Thrawn, ever the innovator, would swiftly develop countermeasures. He would deploy fleets with overlapping fields of fire, overwhelming the Dovan basals with concentrated salvos, and devise coordinated assaults that exploited the timing and limitations of the Vong's gravity wells. Imperial engineers, spurred by Thrawn's insights, would develop new technologies to neutralize the Vong's most prized assets. Before long, the Vong would find their once impervious ships reduced to drifting hulks. The Eclipse itself, as Thrawn's flagship, would serve as the ultimate symbol of Imperial might and tactical dominance. Its super laser would be a decisive factor, capable of obliterating entire Vong fleets or annihilating any fortified planetary positions they established. But for Thrawn, the Eclipse was more than just a weapon, it was a psychological tool. The sight of this colossal vessel, dwarfing even the largest Vong world ships, would break the morale of their forces. The Vong, who believed themselves chosen by their gods to conquer the galaxy, would find their faith shaken as they faced the sheer power of Thrawn's armada. The psychological warfare would not end there. Thrawn's understanding of the Vong's religious zeal would allow him to exploit their faith to devastating effect. He would sow seeds of doubt and discord among their ranks, orchestrating false defeats and spreading disinformation to fracture their unity. The Vong's hierarchy, rigid and unyielding, would be turned against them as Thrawn manipulated their leaders into making fatal errors. The War Masters and domain leaders, confident in their superiority, would find themselves consistently outmaneuvered, their fleets falling victim to Thrawn's masterful traps. On the ground, Thrawn's influence would be equally profound. The Imperial Army, bolstered by ATS, STS, and STS and millions of stormtroopers, would execute Thrawn's strategies with unerring discipline. The Vong's terrifying ground forces, from their monstrous war beasts to their elite warriors, would be met with Imperial precision and overwhelming firepower. Thrawn would ensure that every engagement, from planetary invasions to guerrilla skirmishes, was fought on Imperial terms, and even the Vong's use of bioweapons and psychological terror would be mitigated by Thrawn's foresight, as he implemented contingency plans and developed countermeasures for every conceivable threat. Thrawn's brilliance would also extend to the broader theater of war. The Vong's attempt to exploit hyperspace routes and isolate key sectors would fail under his watch. Using interdictor cruisers and deploying fleets strategically across the galaxy, Thrawn would ensure that the Vong had no safe havens. Every system they invaded would become a death trap, every stronghold a grave. The Empire's logistical might, combined with Thrawn's genius, would ensure that the war was fought not just with firepower, but with a relentless strategic vision. The sheer scale of the Imperial Navy, with its tens of thousands of star destroyers and countless support vessels, would allow Thrawn to conduct simultaneous campaigns across multiple fronts. While other fleets held the line, Thrawn would personally lead the most critical offensives, crushing the Vong's central forces and cutting off their supply lines. The Yuuzhan Vong, once a terrifying extragalactic threat, would be systematically dismantled, their fleets shattered, their warriors slaughtered, and their gods silenced. In the end, Thrawn's leadership would turn the Empire's overwhelming might into an unstoppable force of destruction. The Yuuzhan Vong, for all their fanatical zeal and biological ingenuity, would stand no chance against the combined might of the Empire and the tactical genius of its greatest admiral. Their invasion would be reduced to a footnote in the annals of galactic history, a brief and tragic mistake in the face of the Empire's unyielding dominance. Under Thrawn, the Galactic Empire would not just survive the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, it would annihilate them utterly.